Never ever would I have thought that I'll be shooting this video. Fuck. The Swiss medical system has failed me. I was 25, in shape, training 5 times a week, but something was off. My hormones were at rock bottom. I had the symptoms, I had the blood work, but I've been kept being told that I was in range. In this video, I'm gonna share my full story. I'm gonna show you all the blood work, how the endocrinologists and specialists responded, and why I had to take my health into my own hands. I'm gonna walk you through how I finally rebuilt my energy, my performance, and honestly, my identity through a process that I thought I would never consider at my age: hormone replacement therapy. All of this started in May 2021. I was going through a personally very difficult time, breaking up with my ex-girlfriend at the time, going through something personally additionally, and I just had weeks, months where I felt very off. I mean, all of us feel off at certain times in our life. We go through hard work periods, we go through certain things, but something was really bad. Really bad. I mean, it was so bad, I didn't have an erection for weeks, zero. No libido, zero energy. Even though I slept 8-9 hours every single day, I worked out, I had a healthy diet, nothing seemed to work to make me feel normal again. Just to understand like the degree of like how I felt, it was so bad that every day for weeks, I woke up feeling like I've got hit by a train and a truck and a monster truck at the same time. My mood and energy was so bad that honestly, you could have diagnosed me with a depression. Pretty sure about that. But the thing is, like, I don't believe in labeling things, because I don't think it does anything good for you. I rather explore what can I do to make me feel better? What can I do to get me out of that situation? Instead of confirming and labeling negatively the situation that I'm in. I never shared this with anyone except 2 people in my life. It was so bad that one day I was on the highway driving way above the speed limit, probably like 160, 165, maybe like, I don't know, driving on the highway, holding the steering wheel with one arm, and the only thing that was going through my mind was there would just need to be one turn, quick turn to the side, and everything would be over. Fuck. So I decided to get myself checked to see what's up. And I went to my general practitioner, my family doctor at that time, to get a blood test done, full panel, and I got myself tested. I didn't have a follow-up appointment because they sent me the results directly and said like, yeah, Mr. Keller, everything seems to be normal, and something like, it was like, can't be, like something must be off. And I just asked like, okay, cool, but please just send me the lab results. I want to have a look at them myself. And she sent them over, I had a look, and it was true. Everything seemed to be in range unless the very last marker on the very last page. And in that situation, the very last marker was on the last page. So it was an additional page with just one marker, which she might have most likely overseen. And on that page, it was my testosterone, my total testosterone. And on that blood test done in June 2021, my testosterone came back at 6.37 nanomole per liters, which is converted into 183 nanograms per deciliter in total, which is even for the conservative Swiss reference range out of range. Because the reference range in Switzerland is between 8.6 and 29 nanomoles per liter, which equals to 250 to 840 nanograms per deciliters. For the rest of this video, we're gonna take nanograms per deciliter, as this is the internationally most used unit and it's the easiest to compare all measurements to. So again, my lab result came back at 183 nanograms per deciliter, while the reference range is 250 to 840. And imagine me, mid-20s, probably top 1% of health lifestyle, exercising multiple times a week, eating a very healthy diet, sleeping a lot, reducing stress. Like on paper, everything should have been in the top range, but for some reason I had the testosterone level of a grandma. For this video, we're only going to look at total T, total testosterone, and not additionally also the free T, although that's relevant too, although it would make the video too complicated and would drag it way too far out. For this instance, we're only going to focus on total T. Now, before we go into any other measurements of mine that came up, we have to understand the reference range a little bit. Switzerland seems to have a very conservative reference range when you compare it to the other countries surrounding, and especially then also like to the international societies. So as you can see in this graphic right here, Switzerland has the lowest reference range in all Europe, where most of Europe is around the 300 to 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. Switzerland is in the 250 to 840. So you can see that has already has a very conservative reference range. And especially if you compare it to the international institutions, the Endocrine Society in the USA, the European Association of Urology, or the American Urological Association. And all of them are between 300 to 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. So we can see that Swiss clinics use conservative reference ranges. Now, what we additionally have to understand is reference ranges are based on population averages, including overweight men, including unhealthy people. And as we know, the majority of the population is overweight. You categorize as overweight being above 20% body fat, because from there on forward, it will have a negative impact on your testosterone levels. It will have a negative impact on like all sorts of other things, but for this video, we're obviously going to focus on the hormonal aspect. And at least 70% of men have a body fat percentage above 20%. For you to see as a reference what that means, the man in this photo right here has about 22 to 24%. So if you have more body fat than this, it will most likely have an impact on your testosterone levels. Now, who is also in that statistic? Men with poor sleep, men with low physical activity, with poor nutrition, aging men, because this is not adjusted for the age range. Imagine, I was in my mid-20s. It was out of the range, and especially for my age group, even more. And essentially also men who are symptom-free, but not in optimal health. Because being in range doesn't mean you're hormonally balanced. Being in range doesn't mean you perform at your best. And being in range doesn't mean you're 100% symptom-free. Meaning things such as fatigue, low libido, recovery, lack of muscle, increased risk of fat gain, and lots of other things. So in this graphic right here, you're going to see what would mean to be an optimal range. And an optimal range would be somewhere between 550 to 800 nanograms per deciliter for a 45-year-old metabolically active man. And you can see where that puts you in the European Association, in the US Association, and especially in Switzerland. So being optimal in Switzerland puts you in the top percentile of the population already. And now imagine this. So this is for a 45-year-old. Now this is adjusted for 25-year-old, mid-20s, where I was at that time. And you can see it should be even higher. It should be somewhere between the 600s to 900. And again, I was 180. So again, these are the reference ranges, what it would mean to be optimal in that reference range. However, I want to mention it's not only about the number that you're going to see on your blood test. What also matters, and that at least matters the same amount, if not more, is how are your symptoms? Because in the end, we're not treating blood work, we're treating symptoms, we're treating humans, and it is very, very important to understand. So now that we clarified this, again, my result came back at 183 nanograms per deciliter. So I called back my doctor. I said like, hey, this doesn't look normal to me. He said, totally agree. Let me send you to a specialist. Let me send you to an endocrinologist. That's what he did. And 2 weeks after, because that takes a little bit of time to get an appointment there, I had my next appointment and also got my blood test done at that clinic in July 2021. It was a fully comprehensive test, way deeper than the doctor did, because obviously now we have to dig a little bit deeper into the root cause, what is actually happening. That result back then came back at 211 nanograms per deciliter. Now in the ranges that we're now seeing the numbers, 180 to 210 barely makes any difference. This could be statistical error or just like blood plasma fluctuations. That just could be like some sort of fluctuation. And then after that, obviously I had a consultation with the doctor, and she didn't seem to understand a lot about nutrition. She didn't seem to understand a lot about health and exercise when it comes to like a practical standpoint. She probably has like the qualification in the endocrinology area, but when I tried to talk to her about like, okay, what I'm doing nutrition wise, what I'm doing exercise wise, what I'm doing like everything else, like supplementation, she didn't seem to understand a lot. And she feared that, that's a very interesting part. She told me to stop taking protein supplements because in her mind, or in her opinion, she was worried that the protein powders that I was consuming are fortified with anabolic steroids that would plump my total testosterone and cause the levels that I'm seeing, which to me was very, very difficult to imagine. Because you have to understand, I know the supplement industry is a very dirty industry. What I also know, because of exactly that, is where I have to source my supplements, so I exactly don't have that problem. Because where I get my supplements from, they're third-party, independent, third-party lab tested. They have high reputations. I know the owners in some situations. So running into the issue that the plant-based protein powder that I was using at the time were fortified with anabolic steroids, which was ludicrous to me. But since I was in a very desperate situation, I was like, look, I'll do it, but I honestly don't think this is the missing link that's gonna help me. However, I did what she told me and see how it goes. Obviously, you have to take a little bit of time until, because like if you stop taking protein powder or whatever is the root cause today, you're not gonna feel better or see the results tomorrow. Now, because in that situation, I was so desperate, like honestly, I felt like a piece of shit. I felt so bad, and I was so eager to like resolve this situation. I was not willing to just sit there and hope that skipping protein powder will be the thing that's gonna cause my results and my symptoms to disappear. So what I did is I took action and I went for a second opinion in a second clinic in Zurich, which again was very difficult to get an appointment for because endocrinologists are usually very booked. So imagine first test was in June, second test was in July, the second opinion was in August. So we're already in a 3-month period. So in this situation, I got my appointment in the afternoon, and they also drew the blood in the afternoon, which is usually not how you do it, because if you want to assess, if you want to get the most accurate reading of your testosterone, or if you want to get an accurate reading, not the most accurate, but you want to get an accurate reading, you have to draw it in the morning because that's when your testosterone peaks. That's when you have to draw the blood. Most basic knowledge ever, right? Usually you should do that before 8 or 9. But in this situation, I only got the appointment at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and I just arrived there essentially to draw the blood, to talk quickly to the doctor, have a consultation, so to say, and then 3 weeks later have the follow-up appointment where we looked at the result again. So imagine I came into the clinic again before even seeing the doctor. They took another blood sample of me. 10 minutes later, I went into the doctor's office and he puts the lab results in front of me, said, yep, your levels are in range, because I measured at a 447 nanograms per deciliter in that instance. And he said, you're in range, case closed. Without even looking at the second test, without even looking at like asking how I'm doing, how my symptoms are, how everything else is going, he just said like, okay, you're in range, case closed. Because what is interesting to know now, the second test that I took on this exact day in the morning came back a few days later at 208 nanograms per deciliter. So pretty much the exact same that I had last time with the other endocrinologist. But this endocrinologist had the audacity to just look at one lab value and say like, case closed, not a problem. This, in all honesty, felt, now especially with more context that I have these days and understanding the topic a little bit better, it's just an absolutely irresponsible and unprofessional way of treating patients. One thing is, what is a possible explanation for the outlier of the height or in range testosterone reading, right? So one thing could be a lab error or a sample mix-up, because that honestly happens quite often. A friend of mine works in a lab, and he said, you'll be surprised how often this actually happens. We're not allowed to admit it, but it happens more than we would like to. So lab error could happen, like mislabeling, sample switch, mechanical errors, and especially in busy labs. Then again, another thing is non-standardized test timing. He tested me in the afternoon, not in the morning. You always test in the morning. And especially because an afternoon result is expected to be lower, a high reading would indicate something is unusual. Again, another reason would be circadian rhythm or recovery spike. And then there could be also simply just like short-term physiological fluctuation, because your testosterone can fluctuate for various reasons, for sleep quality, sexual activity, food intake, stress, emotional arousal. But what is the most important thing is it didn't match the overall pattern. It was taken at the wrong time and it didn't match the overall pattern. All tests beforehand were below 220, were half the amount. And he took that one lab and sent me out the door essentially. No context, no nuance, no compassion. He dismissed everything essentially that I told him. All the symptoms, all the struggles that I was having based on one single number from a non-standardized afternoon blood draw and without even looking at the follow-up result. And it doesn't stop here. Obviously, when you see a new doctor, he does an initial consultation, an assessment, and he obviously asked me, like, hey, have you ever taken any anabolic steroids, any testosterone or something like that? And at that point, I've never ever touched anything. It wasn't even on my radar. And only later, I found out that what he has written in the medical report, and only because I had it reviewed by another trusted medical professional, that essentially how he worded the medical report, he basically implied that I have used steroids without ever saying it to me directly. Because the report was framed in a way that only another medical professional would pick up on it and understand what he was saying. And finding that out in retrospect felt like a serious additional breach of trust. So in retrospect, not only do I think my case was maneuvered careless, no attempt to understand the full picture, no curiosity to investigate further, no second opinion invited, just a dismissal and a closed file. So essentially, I left the clinic with a closed case. And at that time, I was continuing to prepare my immigration from Switzerland. I was preparing to live the location-independent lifestyle, and that kept me busy on multiple, as you can imagine, many different ways. Getting rid of everything that you possess is quite time-consuming and interesting process, also, have to say. And during that time, I was also having the follow-up appointment with the first endocrinologist. And although I was personally seeing slight improvements in my symptoms because I was doing a lot of other things to work on that, which I'm going to mention in a second too. But blood test results still, like considering the whole picture and like what would be optimal, I was still far away from that. And my blood results showed that the same. That endocrinologist wasn't willing to do anything further, give me any additional protocol, or try something else. And with me already preparing, about to leave Switzerland, I was like, okay, it looks like I have to take things into my own hands. And that's where I started to search for someone that could actually help me in that case and who understands the things that I'm doing already. And after countless inquiries, second opinions, talking to people, researching, after months of feeling dismissed and overlooked and not understood, I finally came across someone who knew what I was doing, who understood the nutrition protocols that I was doing, the training that I was doing, who understood blood work and hormonal health, and is a professional athlete himself, a medical doctor himself. And for the first part, I finally, just by explaining what I was having, for the first time I felt understood. And that was a very refreshing thing to feel after months of just like talking into a wall, essentially. Out of respect for his privacy, I'm not going to mention his name, but to put it that way, he has been one of the most pivotal figures in my life when it comes to everything, to life, essentially. Because he was the one that has been helping me to make sense of all of this and take actual protocols and actionable steps towards seeing improvements. And all of that happened remotely. And just like shortly after I left Switzerland, I did another blood sample at my general practitioner, at my doctor, and that one came back at 225 nanograms per deciliter. So again, confirmed the previous pattern with a lot of room for improvement. And then from there, I left. I spent my first month abroad in Portugal, in Lisbon, actually 5 or 6 weeks that was. Then after Lisbon, I went to Mexico where I stayed for 6 months. And during all of that time, I was following his protocol precisely. I was continuing doing blood tests. And yeah, to be honest, like I started feeling improvements. But it's difficult to say like how significant these improvements are and what they essentially all come from, because I do work on a lot of things also elsewhere. Mentally, spiritually, physically, in a lot of different ways. So I left Switzerland late October. December I was in Lisbon, Mexico from December onward. In January I got my next blood test done, which came back at 299 nanograms per deciliter, so let's say 300, which was starting to get into the reference range, but still for my lifestyle, for my practices, for my age, still nowhere where it should be. March 2022 marked the 10 months of investigation and 12 months of having symptoms. So just to like recap quickly, like what it means to have like low T, what are the consequences? Essentially, it will mean you have reduced muscle mass and strength, increased risk of fat gain, low bone density, low energy and drive, low libido, reduced bedroom performance, increased risk of fertility issue, increased risk of metabolic problems such as type 2 diabetes, strokes and heart disease, and in the end also what is very important to mention too, reduced confidence and the slower career momentum. So it's not just a nice to have, like, oh, you get a little bit more muscle. It's crucial for a healthy and fulfilled life. And like I said, up until then, I was following my trusted doctor's protocol for 6 months. The next blood test was the one that we said, we're gonna have to make a decision how we're gonna proceed, if we are on the right track or if we have to consider medical assistance. I'm just getting shaky right now by like talking about it, because I was resisting against it. I really didn't want to go down that route, because also like it, you know, like it means a lot of things. Not only are you going to be dependent for the rest of your life on it essentially when you have to make the decision to do it, but also because I was priding myself in the natural state, being natural as an athlete, as a recreational athlete. I couldn't imagine having the thought of like being on testosterone replacement therapy. It was just like not, like I was so resistant against it and it could not enter my mind. But I was also being reminded and aware of like what it means to be with low testosterone for months, years, and then in the end also like possible decades. And essentially, if you're being subclinical or suboptimal testosterone levels, it will also take years of your life. Not only will it make the life that you're living not as fulfilling, more miserable, but it will literally take off years of your life, because having low testosterone is not healthy for you. And the next blood test was the one that where we're gonna say, this is where we have to make the decision, because if with everything that we've did, according to the best possible knowledge, to the most up-to-date scientific knowledge, evidence that we had at that point, it was the time to make a decision. So in March, I went to the clinic, I did the results. A few days later, my result came back at 335 nanograms per deciliter. So pretty much in a very similar, pretty much the same range as the last test came back. And which just showed like, okay, yeah, for age, activity, for the protocol that you've been on, for everything that you've been doing, nutrition-wise, supplement-wise, stress, recovery, like everything in the top, probably 0.1% of the population, and having a result of 335 is clearly a red flag. So what I did is I took all my lab results, I went to a local specialist and showed them all the data that we collected. And after looking at all the data again with another specialist, the official diagnosis was a functional hypogonatropic hypogonadism, which essentially is a form of secondary hypogonadism. Right there, and then I started my testosterone replacement therapy. April 1st, 2022 marks the day where my life started to shift in a different direction. I didn't feel an immediate response, because even though if you're using injectable testosterone, it will take a moment until your body responds to it. More or less a month later, I took another sample, which came back at 723 nanograms per deciliter. So my total testosterone has, from the last measurement, more than doubled. And from my initial measurement, which was 180, essentially 4x, 4 times the levels. And yeah, obviously things started to improve slowly but steadily, more and more. And ever since then, I've been in the upper part of the reference range with my optimized protocol. And throughout that time, I continued working with the top experts in the industry and learned from them, such as Dr. Peter Attia, Dr. Mike Israetel, Broderick Chavez, to continuously learn about the topic, because I just don't want to only be on therapy and like receive the medication, but I also want to understand the underlying biology, the underlying physiological impacts, and what it means if I do this and that, what it in the end means for my body. To give you a little bit of an idea, because you hear now the numbers, but I want to show you now also like what it meant from a physical standpoint, what that actually meant. The picture that you're gonna see right here. Here, I was already training for 4 years, consistently in the gym, 5 days a week, very optimized nutrition in a lot of different ways. And this picture right here, I was training for 7 years and being for 3 years on TRT. There's probably somewhere between like 10, 15, maybe a little bit more difference kilos of muscle mass. But what is important to understand, like the muscle is like maybe like a nice side effect. Today, my life looks completely different. Like you have no idea how different of a human I feel. Looking back now with the knowledge that I have today, I might have struggled with low testosterone like way before that, but I just thought it was normal. And my life has taken a massive turn at that point, not only physically, but mentally, spiritually, and essentially existentially. I feel more authentic to myself and more polarized to my partner. I am naturally in my masculine energy so she can feel safe in her feminine energy. My training finally responds accordingly to the effort that I'm putting in. My drive is awesome and effort feels very good. And honestly, I feel I have my fucking fire back. If I would have not questioned the diagnosis at that point and would just have continued with my life and accepted the diagnosis, I would probably still be dealing with the symptoms, still feel miserable, put myself in an elevated risk for many different things, such as including depression, metabolic risks, and an overall decreased quality of life. But just because I understood and I listened to my intuition and I kept fighting for what I knew was right or not right in that situation, I was able to turn my life massively around. And to finish this off and give you maybe some recommendations, if you have symptoms, get yourself checked. Some doctors are actually quite resistant to looking at your hormones, because I'm doing that with my members inside the Fit High Performer. I do that too with them, and we had quite a few pushbacks from the doctors that were not willing to do this for various reasons. My suspicion is, first of all, because they're not qualified on that, or because they've been not taught how important it is. They don't understand how important that is. But having optimal sex hormones is one of the most crucial things for a high quality life. But what we still have to understand is that your blood work is not as important as your symptoms. So we always have to look at both blood work and the symptoms, because you can have 0 symptoms and be in the lower range of the reference range, but you can still feel totally fine. Then it's less likely for you to needing to change anything. But of course, also what you have to be aware of is lifestyle factors and environmental factors can influence your hormonal health in various degrees, especially your lifestyle choices. Stress, sleep, diet, training, how much light you're getting, your supplementation, everything will have a direct influence in how you feel and how your hormonal health will be displayed. Now, of course, I'm not here to give you any medical advice. I'm just sharing what I've learned through personal experience and the relative high amount of money that I've invested through coaching, mentorship, and additional research from working with some of the top experts in the world. But what I say is this: if you have continuous low lab results, continuous symptoms, while you've already improved diet, sleep, exercise, stress, supplementation, and all other relevant lifestyle factors, but you still show up with the symptoms and have the lab results, it is maybe worth having an open conversation with a qualified specialist. Whether that's exploring more advanced testing or possible therapeutic treatments is then the decision up to the medical professional. But the point is, you deserve to be taken seriously. You deserve to have optimized health, and you deserve to feel like yourself again. As Peter Attia well said, medicine is great at keeping people from dying, but it's terrible at keeping people from living well.